We're back here at CPAC with Rebekah Koffler, who is the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. And Rebekah, I've seen a number of your interviews. The situation with Putin, you know it best because of your background. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Of course. So I was born and raised in the former Soviet Union. I came to this country more than 30 years ago because I was raised by my parents to be, to love America. So America is the land of freedom of opportunity. After September 11th, I wanted to serve my adopted homeland, and I joined the intelligence community. And I served as a DIA intelligence analyst, the CIA analyst for Russian doctrine and strategy. And so this is why I know what Putin thinks, both from the standpoint of him being a Russian, and Russians don't think like Americans, no matter what, you may hear, and also his warfighting strategy, his plans, because the intelligence community had a thorough understanding of what that was.
Okay, what are his plans? I know we're not in his mind, but I think that the American people are rightly confused right now as to what is happening in Ukraine and what Putin's intentions are. So
Sure.
for the general
Yes.
public.
So it's much broader than Ukraine, right? Ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Russian, what they call strategic security perimeter, has reduced with the admission of the Baltics into NATO, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. So the distance between Moscow and the closest NATO force has reduced from 1,000 miles to 100 miles. That is shorter than between here in DC and New York, right? And so the distance, the security perimeter, they call it the buffer, is how the Russians relied on their security for a century and fought multiple wars, right, over it, because they have the strategy of trading territory for enemy's blood. So Ukraine is a buffer state, and so Ukraine tried to be part of the Western orbit, right? And we have been, doing overtures into Ukraine. We've been training them in warfighting tactics, and Putin decided that America is a threat to Russia because they've been watching our military campaigns for the past 20 years, right? Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, especially Kosovo, and that gave them jitters, right? And especially with the rhetoric coming out of the White House that Putin, cannot remain in power, he decided that he's going to be next, that we want regime change, and that's why he decided to attack Ukraine to increase that buffer.
Okay, so we're saying it's a war over this buffer zone.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so at this point, we're deep in it. How do we extricate ourselves, or we're going to be there for as long as it takes, which so many politicians have said, as long as it takes?
Yes, my intelligence analysis tells me that this war right now is unwinnable and there's no exit strategy. The reason it's unwinnable is Russia, despite the fact that they exhibited like a lot of mishaps, tactically incompetence, it's still the second military in the world next to the United States. So, and China, let's say Russia and China, they are considered right now by the intelligence community and the Pentagon as the top strategic competitors, right? So Ukraine is much smaller, not only from the standpoint of military forces, but also the population. As long as we continue to provide high-tech superior weaponry to Ukraine, which we have already provided or promised to provide 196 billion. Those are massive numbers. Russia cannot win. It will have to rely on nuclear weapons, and this is why Putin has been warning it. As long as Ukraine also cannot win because it's just outmatched by Russia, Putin has a strategy of out-suffering and outlasting the adversary because they have a lot more people. It's the meat grinder strategy. And so that's why there's this perpetual conflict that has a high risk of escalating into a European theater.
What about the fact that China is now recently meeting with Putin? So what does that have to do with what's taking place on the chessboard?
A lot. It has a lot to do with it. Russia and China are strategic partners, right? They're not true strategic partners in the sense of in the true sense of the world, but they're joining forces to the extent that they can challenge the United States, right? Because both of them fear the United States, but at the same time, they want to prevent the United States from interdicting into their plans to secure control over their sphere of influences, right? Russia in Eurasia and China, reintegrating Taiwan and possibly taking over Taiwan militarily. And so China is now on track to provide lethal assistance to Russia, which is going to be a game changer. They're already providing non-lethal assistance. They're already helping Russia financially. So that just, again, contributes to the indefinite nature of this war, because my analysis tells me that we're just going to continue escalating and pumping in more weaponry, because that's the trajectory. It started off with blankets and night vision goggles, but we are now into the strategic realm. We're providing Patriot missile defense system, Bradleys, we're providing tanks, which is we are inching up to actually give them warplanes, and that can flip the battlefield, but it can also trigger Putin to authorize his so-called escalate to de-escalate doctrine, which is a detonation of a low-yield tactical nuclear warhead in the European theater, specifically in Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Rebekah Koffler, the author of Putin's Playbook. Make sure you get it. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Take care.
Yes.